part of climate restoration. I said, let's get it together. We're gonna feel alright. Yo, 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 let's get it together. Gonna feel alright. Replace NATO with your Rampa man. It's a better peace plan for Ukraine. I said, let's get it together. We're gonna feel alright. Yo, 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 let's get it together. Gonna feel alright. If you wanna solve the climate problem, man, just look at the plankton. It's your friend. I said, let's get it together. We're gonna feel alright. Yo, 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 let's get it together. Come on, man. No more doom and gloom, man. We're gonna make it through, man. Yo, 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 yo. Right?
Perfect.
Okay.
Well, no other introduction is needed, really. I'd like to, we have Alex Carlin here, and I'm Paul Beckwith with the Climate Emergency Forum, and here we are at COP to do lots of press conferences and learn what we can and try to make a difference, I guess. So what have you been up to this COP?
Oh, it's been amazing. You know, I flew from Moscow to Cairo a week ago. Having those 3 days in the pyramids and in the Cairo, incredibly vibrant scene they have there. In the history, I went to the museum and saw all the mummies and sarcophaguses lying on the floor of the museum. It just got me in a sort of to be ready to, well, what are we going to do about climate now? Now that we're in a country that has thousands of years of wisdom and incredible history, like, let's use that and judo that into like a solution, right? So I arrived here, and the first thing that happened, I went right to the press conference, because, you know, I've got all the credentials and I can go anywhere I want here, right? So I went right into the top press conference of the top people of COP27. And what did they say? They said, this is all about emissions reduction. So I raised my hand, you know, there were too many questions. They didn't get around to me. But if they had, this is what I would have said. I would have said, well, okay, Pakistan just was submerged, you know, essentially destroyed to a large degree by the CO2 that's already in the atmosphere. If you focus COP27 on the additional incremental, marginal 1% more of that blanket, and that's all you're focusing on, Pakistan just going to keep happening. So I would ask that to this COP. So that's just negative doom and gloom. I'm not interested in that. I'm interested in positive, like what are we really doing? So it turns out, in the couple days I've been here, amazing things have happened. And Russ George came by, and I happen to be in the green zone.
So why don't you say who Russ George is first?
Okay. Well, Russ George is sort of the mastermind these days of Ocean Pasture Restoration, which started with John Martin, 30, 40 years ago. He's like the premier ocean scientist who figured out the importance of the oceans and the photosynthesis in terms of the planet going from ice age to more like we have now and back to ice age. That kind of fluctuation is driven by, because we're the blue planet, it's driven in large part by what happens in the oceans and this plankton and this kind of photosynthesis and how that changes the temperature. And it turns out the capacity of this planet to deal with this sort of thing is mostly in the ocean. So you can love the Amazon, and I love the Amazon, but there's 20 Amazons underwater or more. And so that's where the action is. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a positive thing, because the idea that Russ came by to start making contacts here, because it's on this OPR thing, this Ocean Pasture Restoration, is a way to bring the CO2 levels down. And actually, the first thing it does is bring back a lot of fish populations and feeds a lot of starving people. But in terms of climate, it's the biggest first step we can make. And it's already happening all around the world. And this COP27 is wonderful for that kind of networking and that kind of progress. In terms of the leadership and what they're saying about emissions reduction, it's kind of a waste of time. But that's okay, because it's not a waste of time, because this wonderful COP27 is an incredible place for people from all over the world to meet each other, talk face to face. It's fantastic. I'm very positive about COP.
Yes. Now, what materials are you talking about with the for causing the ocean pastures to restore? And also, where would you like? You have to choose the locations, the oceans, very carefully. Whether northern latitudes, southern latitudes,
it's like this.
Equator.
Yeah, that's absolutely. But first, you have to step back and see what is the ecology and what is going on. And the first thing I would say to look at is what they call an eddy. An eddy are these kind of circular rotating parts in the ocean. That's where the life forms are concentrated, and that's really where it's like the food. It's like the cafeteria for the baby fish. It's like where they go to eat. And so when the baby salmon are coming down the river and they're supposed to go out to the eddies to eat and become big salmon, they starve to death because there's not enough plankton there now. It's down. And the reason for that is a 50-year dust-fall drought, which I'll explain. If you have a land farm, they want rainfall. If you're underwater life, if you have a biomass underwater, they're waiting for dustfall because that's where they get their nutrition. And that's the wind takes nutritional dust from the deserts and dry land masses and puts it in the ocean, and that's how you get a lot of plankton. But the reason why there's been less dustfall is because the CO2 that's been generated by the Industrial Revolution from 100 years ago even has caused the dry land masses to get just that much more moist, and the grass is just that much wet that you get a lot less dust. But that's good news in a total sense, because it's really easy, fast, cheap, groovy, safe, and wonderful, and it's everything you would want it to be in terms of a solution, because it's not a big deal, right? You can just, exactly. The way we look at it is 100 fishing villages. You get 100 villages around the world who want to bring back their fish to add just little tiny bits of nutrition, like you would, to be a good farmer or a good to be a good doctor, whatever you want to call it. That's all it takes, and you can bring back the plankton, which draws huge amounts of CO2 out, enough to make a difference.
I mean, there's a saying that like every second breath that you take is from plankton, derived from plankton in the ocean. The other half, I guess, is the forest, the boreal forest mostly.
Right, I would say it goes even more than that. But
I think so too. Yeah. Now, the plankton are also very important for generating chemicals such as dimethyl sulfide, which seed low-level clouds and cause some cooling. So you can relate OPR to Stephen Salter's marine cloud brightening ideas.
It's really important to think about albedo, which is a way of saying reflecting that sunlight back into space, cooling the planet. Why are we here at COP27? Because of the greenhouse effect. What's the big deal about that? Overheating, right? So if you can reflect that sunlight in a natural, wonderful way, like white clouds, naturally generated by plankton blooms, what could be better than that, right? That's wonderful, and that's a big part of OPR, absolutely.
Yeah. You'll probably be happy to know that OPR is needed even more and will be even more effective than you think because of this aerosol effect. So It turns out that the bulk of the literature on how much global dimming there is, how much of global warming is being hidden by aerosols, the consensus was about 0.5 degrees Celsius. Now, a recent paper measured ship trails and when we measure ship trails to look at how much they cause cooling, it was only the visible trails that were looked at up until this paper, which was just published a month ago, and that looks at the trails that you cannot see. So so the ship goes along, generating all these trails, some visible, some invisible to the eye and satellites, etc. Then you know how much time passes before the satellite goes over that region and does a measurement. So you calculate where the trails move in the prevailing winds and generate a new path of where you expect them to be. And right in those regions, you get cooling. So it's actually more like 1 degree Celsius is the global dimming effect, not half a degree. Now, none of the computer models use that yet. This is just very, very recent research. It needs to be confirmed. But if it pans out, and it sounds like it will, to me, then the plankton will have a bigger impact on cooling than you or Russ might even expect if you're using those numbers that we've assumed previously. You know what I'm saying? So that the ocean plankton have a number of effects. I mean, mostly people talk about it. Mostly you're talking about it for drawing down carbon, which we need to do. But there's also these other effects of direct cooling by the aerosol generation.
Yeah, I mean, we mentioned the plankton blooms create the white clouds, but they also...
Low-level clouds.
Yeah, okay, but they still reflect. But they also, apparently, they do a lot of cleaning of mercury, for an example. And also you can look at it this way in terms of, we know that ocean acidification is this horrible thing, right? Well, it turns out that when the plankton is doing, when it's robust, that CO2 that's interacting with the water and creating this carbonic acid, which is ocean acidification, when the plankton is involved, it doesn't do that. Instead of making acid molecules, it makes more plankton and more things like that. So that's a wonderful effect. And there's one other thing. They have trillions of, you can think about it as trillions of fins. And they do this thing where they go in a daily sort of a sojourn. Yeah. They go down and they go up. And when they do that, that churns the cold water up to the top, which is helpful. It's helpful.
This is the largest migration on the planet is actually the daily movement of zooplankton through the water column. So during the day, they go down to the deep. The plankton can proliferate with the sunlight. They're near the surface. Right. And then at night, they come up to the surface and they eat the plankton.
Exactly.
And then they do. So it's a huge. It's the largest migration on the planet, really. It's the zooplankton moving up and down through the water column that will cause the mixing in the water column, which is important for a number of different reasons. One is to bring oxygen from the surface, right? The interaction of the air with the water. You get oxygen absorbed in the water, and that moves downwards, which is very healthy for fish and everything living down. You're talking about maybe down 100 meters or so. And also it brings up the cold water from down below to cause some cooling of the surface.
That's helpful in these hurricanes that they get all this kick from the high temperatures of the surface water, It's nice to bring that down. No question about that. And just we keep saying OPR, I'm not sure if it's clear that it's Ocean Pasture Restoration, where the word pasture is this sort of way of expressing the underwater Amazon concept, that it's and that it's something that you tend to pasture. You help it if you can, and you're just trying to make it more healthy. And you're watching it. And you mentioned to be careful. It takes like a year of careful study in these OPR projects. You don't just go and do something. You study it for a year and you check your pet what eddy you're going to deal with, and then you go out. The villagers go out in their boats, and they tend their little eddy. And you watch it, and there's never been a negative effect in the history of the planet in this kind of thing, because all that OPR does is what nature does, but OPR does tiny bits of what nature does in huge, like volcanoes and dust storms, a huge amount of this kind of putting the iron-rich dust and the mineral-rich dust. When nature does it, it's thousands of times more, and there's still never been a negative effect ever recorded in the deep ocean. And it's just fine, right? And like anything, you just got to do it and see what happens, right?
You've mentioned the plankton having a big impact on glacier like warm periods, cold periods, warm periods. Yes. That's exactly the case, because when the planet is warmer, you have more desert areas that can then generate the dust, and the dust gets blown, say, from the Sahara across the Atlantic, falling in, stimulating the phytoplankton growth. Right. Whereas when you have a colder planet, you don't have, the dust is more locked into place. So it's kind of like feedbacks to the system.
Yeah, but it's more the moisture thing.
The moisture thing is the most important.
Yeah, and the grassy thing, the grass gets a little grassier. It's true, yeah. It's so, but that's, this is just, the point is, like, I would like to see the future COPs getting a little more involved in what we're talking about, and I think they are. I think there's a lot of indications where people are starting to understand that this is pretty much the best thing going right now. And I'm starting to get that feeling that word's getting around in a positive sense. I was just in the Qatar booth, right? They're involved in some things, and they're very open to this kind of thing. And just as an example, people, when they hear about it, it makes a lot of sense. And so, but very few people have actually heard of it. Yeah, and it's
I mean, what can be bad with having more plankton? I mean, we know
Yeah.
most people are aware we've lost 90% of the large fish in the ocean. So the thing is when you generate the ocean pastures, you get more zooplankton, then you get small fish eating the zooplankton all the way up the trophic food web. So you can actually stimulate a huge recovery of marine life. I mean, we've eliminated over half of the total marine biomass, life in the ocean.
Here's another way to look at it is like, yes, all these areas are reporting 90% loss of the large fish and things like that. And then what they do about it is they have a misdiagnosis and they say, it must be those evil Japanese trawlers scooping everything out. So they do this moratorium on any fishing, and then for 5 years, and then they find out it didn't do any good. And it's like, well, that's because it's a misdiagnosis. It's it's the dustfall drought and the fact that the eddies don't have food for the fish to eat that's the main reason for the fish populations going down. And when they realize that, and a couple times, like in Alaska 10 years ago, when they responded in that sense and had the proper diagnosis, proper prescription, which is help the eddies, right? And they did, and the fish came back.
Yeah.
So, how about that? So that's the kind of thing we're trying to generate now in this kind of thing. And we don't really have a lot of time right now to do a lot of pure research and stuff like that. We have to have action.
Yeah. There's areas of the ocean known as high nutrient, low iron.
Right.
And these areas, if you get a little touch of iron in these areas, you can have huge, enormous phytoplankton growth very, very quickly. So this is a very rapid method to draw down.
Yeah, it was John Martin's theory all those years ago. And he's been proven right, really.
Yeah.
But it's just, the proof is just beginning. We're just in the first stages of doing a lot of this as an actual activity. And that's what's exciting, though. It's like a lot all over the planet, people are getting ready to do it.
Yeah. Well, let me give a little interesting story. I went to a World Bank talk yesterday, and one of the vice president of sustainable development, Jürgen Vogeli. So I approached him after the talk, and because he was talking about financing things, and I said, do you do any financing of interesting projects coming along that are not that much in the public knowledge and sphere? And I talked to him about OPR, Ocean Pasture Restoration. I talked to him about Yitao's MEER, which MEER, which is the Mirror Project, and I talked to him about Stephen Salter's marine cloud brightening. I said, I mean, a little bit of money in these areas, we're not talking about a lot, could make an enormous difference, because these things actually, work. And he said, we only do stuff that's like about $1 billion. We only fund projects that are $1 billion or larger. So we have to, they're not going to give like a couple 100,000 or $1 million to a group.
The irony of the situation.
So we need to get you guys thinking bigger. What would you do with $1 billion?
Yeah. Robert Tulip has something to do with the brightening, right? He has an interesting concept of just focusing on things that brighten and things that reflect and albedo, and having that high up in the priority list, which I think he's right.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating, and if you're not familiar as a viewer with Ocean Pasture Restoration, you really need to just investigate it. It has enormous potential. So, is there anything else? And I mean, I think we should get you to play a little.
Ocean Pasture Restoration. Yeah, it's time for celebration. Yeah, because Russ George is getting it done, and all kinds of countries are saying, yeah, we're gonna. I'll tell you what. It was climate ruin. Hey, but we saw that storm brewing back in 2020. 2022 at COP27. Everybody thought it was all over and there was no hope. But then everybody started to hear about Ocean Pasture Restoration and OPR and things like albedo and things you could do, and we got on the right road. Not a moment too soon. That's right. Come on.
Well, thank you for this fascinating interview about a most, very important topic. I want to thank all the viewers, especially the people on the Climate Emergency Forum. Please click on that subscribe button and check out our other videos. There is a previous video on OPR, a couple videos on OPR in the past, yes. And now there's another one. Well, thank you.
Thank you. Restoration. I said, let's get it together. We're gonna feel alright. Yo, 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 let's get it together. Gonna feel alright. Replace NATO with your rampa man. It's a better piece.